I'm so used to wearing it now, right? Thank you for that reminder. Okay, so welcome everyone to this presentation where we'll just delve a little bit more into what does it mean to be a Green Chalice church and what are some of the other things that we might be thinking about both individually as disciples of Christ and as congregation. So again, I'm Reverend Carol Devine. Green Chalice was started actually in 2007 in Kentucky. By me and another beautiful group of Kentuckians who wanted the disciples in Kentucky, the Christian church in Kentucky, to work together to figure out how do we live our best faith life while walking more gently on the earth. In 2011, Green Chalice became a ministry of Disciples Home Missions and became a denomination-wide ministry. And in 2015, we were able to grow a little bit and welcome Reverend Scott Hardinieri. And so now Scott and I are co-ministers for Green Chalice. And so I know some of you already know Scott. He is from Texas and did ministry in Colorado and now resides in Asheville, North Carolina. We are a covenant people. And as part of your covenant, you all signed, or the parts of you signed, the Green Chalice covenant. And while the actual covenant isn't as important, the words of the actual covenant aren't as important as us just realizing that we are in covenant with God, right? And that through that, our covenant is to be lived out. So this is one covenant, the one that we use at Green Chalice. And sorry, there might be a little bit of feedback. As children of God and followers of Christ Jesus, we covenant to worship God with all creation and pray for the healing of the earth, study the climate crisis and engage others in climate solutions, repent and forgive for the harm we have inflicted on the earth that sustains life, advocate for eco-justice public policies and witness by living sustainable lifestyles, rest in God's good creation, and invite others to delight in nature. For those of us who don't grow up in the church, either because there isn't one or we don't have families who brought us up, we still come to know God outside. Some people call the natural world the first Bible or the first scripture, because even if we don't have access to a Bible or to church, we can come to know God through nature. And so I wanted to tell you a little story and hope that my story might also get you thinking about experiences that you have had outside where you have felt so connected to God. So there's a place in South Carolina, an island near Charleston called Kiowa Island, and it's a place that I just really treasure. And on that island, there is something that happens that is only known to happen two places in the world, both on the east coast of the United States. Where the mouth of the river meets the sea is a wonderful feeding ground for dolphins. But what is unusual is that those dolphins at some point in the past have learned a technique that is named by humans as stranding or strand fishing. But it's a process by where the dolphins work together to circle up fish and at low tide make a wave that throws the fish towards the riverbank This is right in the river at the mouth of the sea, throws the fish up on the riverbank, and in so doing, they all snap up and eat these fish. They then train and teach their children dolphins to learn how to do this as well. And so while I had heard of it, I had never witnessed it and had been to Kiowa many times. But one day I was just walking at sunset down the beach and came to the place where I had to stop walking because I came to the river bank. And this is not my video because mine isn't this good, but this is what I saw. This is only known to happen in 2 places in the world, and they're both on the eastern side of the United States. And I don't know how long they've been doing it, but they do teach. They teach it to their babies, and it happens at low tide, and it's really cool. So whether it be that whether it be that that your experience is on the ocean or in the beautiful mountains here around Albuquerque or some other place, most all of us have had those experiences where we just have no words but awe, or wow, or crying even. Those moments where we are blessed to experience God through the natural world. And I hope that all of us can maybe think of one. Do you all have those tucked in your memory of those kinds of experiences in nature and the mountains, or maybe even in a backyard, or I know somebody who has one with a hummingbird. It could be on a river, it could be in the desert. But glaciers, oh wow, yeah. We all hopefully carry these experiences. So I want to talk just a little bit, and you all know these things, but I want to talk just a little bit about why we do this work. Do you need me to pause? Okay. Why we do this work. Why should we care? Why does it matter that we are involved in this? And the first one is that our very first experiences with God, and for those who don't have access to church or to the scripture, are in nature. Nature is where we encounter God, and therefore we are called to steward that so that all people might have those experiences. And to be honest, just this topic could be a whole hour of conversation, couldn't it? Of the importance of all of our children and all humans having access to wild places and spaces where we can get to know God. The first reason we should care is because of nature and experiencing God there. But as people of faith, as disciples of Christ, we also care because Scripture tells us we must. This is just, these are tiny because there's so many, and I didn't put them all up here, but the Hebrew Scriptures call us to care. Ecclesiastes 3:19 says, "Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. We care because the Hebrew Scriptures call us to care. We care because our New Testament Scriptures call us to care, because we are called to love the Lord our God with all our hearts and souls and mind and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. How do we define the neighbors? Christ tells us the story of the Good Samaritan, right? We are even to care for and call our neighbors those that we might otherwise call enemy or might call us enemy. We are called to call our neighbors all people, whether privileged or marginalized, whether rich or poor. We might also even consider our neighbors to be critters and creatures, trees and plants. So we care because of the natural world and our call to protect it. We care because our holy scriptures call us to care. We care because we are experiencing climate change right now. And as people of faith, we're called to respond to the devastations that are occurring, the fires and the floods. We care because everything we do should be connected to who we are and whose we are. Everything we do should be reflecting of our faith. This is a quote from a climate scientist. I used to think that top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. We are called to care because we care about justice issues. We care about hunger. We care about children. We care about poverty and water and health and migration and peace and race. And because we care about all justice issues, we care about climate change because they are all interconnected. What does it look like when a congregation cares? You all know because you're doing it and you're living it out here. And so what I'm challenging West Mesa to do, and anyone who's joining us today on the internet to do, is to think of what can we do next. And so congregational creation care, we can see it in our worship services, in our spiritual practices, in our music. We saw that this morning so clearly. We can see it through education, adult workshops, Sunday school, children and youth programs, through our buildings and grounds, through public witness, which is advocacy, how we spend our money. And Mark gave such a great testimony of how you all tithe as a church. So that is our public witness as well. Through our fellowship and outreach, through partnerships and programs that we do in the community and denomination, and sustainability and resilience, so that we are continuing in all of these areas. I want to show you a short video of a congregation that is also doing this, and I hope we can hear it. Uh-oh. Okay, we heard the last video, and when we tried this one out, it worked, but now I don't hear it. technical difficulties. Well, I don't know why it would change after just this last time. It was fine, right? Okay.
Is your volume all the way up?
Yeah. I mean, we just heard, right? No, we don't want that when we want. Yeah, it's all the way. It's 100%. I don't either. So we might just. Yep, that's all the way up. The master. Okay, we'll just skip that. Where's the current slide? Here we go. All right. So I apologize. We tried all of the videos before the service, and they all worked. And I don't know why the volume wasn't working on that one, but we will continue on. So I wanted to just, one of the things that I think is really important for all of us faith people who are not scientists, who are most of us, is just to give us a little bit of science. Because one of the things that's really important for us to know is that while we often think that other people aren't concerned about the climate crisis, what research tells us is that most people in the United States are concerned to varying degrees about the climate crisis. And it's important for us as people of faith who are leading on this issue to talk about it. It's really important that we feel confident to talk about it because we know that most people are concerned, okay? So let's just do a little bit of climate science. And again, I am not a climate scientist, but I think it's really important for us to feel confident to say some of the things that we know climate scientists 100% agree on. So this is just, I want you to watch this video. It's going to start with the year 1880, and it's going to go all the way through last year. And it's going to show you the warming of the planet. 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 60s. Now we're in the 70s, 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, and to 2021. In 2021, we had $20 billion climate weather disasters, more than any other time in human history. $20 billion climate weather disasters. We experience the climate crisis differently depending on where we live. Here in New Mexico, 78% of your state is in what is called a severe drought. There are different categories of drought. You all are more aware of that than I am. In my state, it's the opposite. We have more water than we ever have, and it comes in large quantities in a short amount of time. Climate change equals extreme weather. This morning in worship, one of the things that was lifted up was prayers for the Northeast who are under so much snow. Climate change equals extreme weather. This is Austin, Texas, 1 year ago. What I want you all to understand and know is there is consensus that the climate change is here, that we are experiencing it, and that it is in large part due to human activity. 100% of National Academy scientists, 99.9% of scientific articles, the national intelligence, our government, our Army and Navy, and all of our armed forces are all part of making plans to address the climate crisis and the weather disasters that come with it. Where we're at. The warming of the climate system is unequivocal. The role of humans is indisputable. Atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have increased to levels unprecedented in the last 800,000 years. 800,000 years. Through ice core data, they're able to see what the CO2 was in the atmosphere. Increasing magnitudes of warming increase the likelihood of severe, pervasive, and irreversible impacts. The news is really overwhelming, right? The scientists have been telling us this for decades and decades and decades. And now we're experiencing all the things that they have told us. And in my lifetime and most all of yours, we will not see it get better, no matter how good we are. So that's the really hard news, and it's heart stuff, right? And it sometimes is so hard that it makes us just want to shut down. But what's important on this page is right here, the last thing. The overall risks of climate change impacts can be reduced by limiting the rate and magnitude of climate change. We can make a difference. Going back to this is hard stuff, I want to talk about one of the things that is really important, especially for our younger people, our youth and children to hear, but all of us. And that is that the climate change and all of the science, it impacts us. It impacts our health and it impacts our hearts. And we now know that sometimes, and maybe we're more aware of it now with the pandemic, and for that I'm grateful. You know, when you just have a hard day and you think, why am I having such a hard day? Why am I feeling so blue? Why am I feeling so stressed? Why do I want to go to bed and put the covers over my head? You have a right to have those feelings because the news and the science and the world is really hard. And there is something that we call eco-grief, or some people call it climate grief, or some other word like that. But it is real and is impacting all of us. But the biggest impacts are on our youngest people. And it's important for us to say that to them and to acknowledge the stress and pressure that they're under, and that the world that they're growing up in is very different from the world that we grew up in, those of us who are a little older. But there are ways that we can cope with eco-grief. And the number one thing is the thing that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, which is getting out in nature and having those experiences with God. So whether it be taking a walk outside or going on a hike or just sitting out under a tree, watching the birds or feeling the breeze, these are all the number one ways that we can cope with the effects of eco-grief, but any kind of grief, any kind of stress. Get outside. There are eco-grief circles. I actually forwarded an email to Ray about some eco-grief circles that are coming up. They're virtual and anyone is invited to participate. And I ask Ray to share that with anyone who is interested in joining one. They are a 7-week commitment that once a week you get on for an hour and a half, and you're led through a process of how do we deal with our grief. Take action is another way that we deal with eco-grief, by being part of the change that we want to see in the world, by doing the things that you all are doing here at your church and hopefully in your own homes and lives. By taking action and living out our faith is actually a way that we can combat this grief. To celebrate life and not feel guilty about it. To celebrate life and not feel guilty about it. Because the one thing that we know about Jesus is that life is complicated and is never just this or this. So that we can hold the pain and the suffering of the pandemic. We can hold the grief that comes with the climate crisis, and we can experience joy and celebrate life. Don't feel guilty about laughing and dancing and hiking and smiling and having a good time. This is our one precious life, you all. So please don't feel guilty about that. And then therapy. We all have a right to mental health care. And so sometimes when the grief or the stress of life and the climate crisis is too much, we might need to wave a little flag, right? And seek out professional help. As we think about action, living out our faith, it's important for us to understand what are the drivers, the biggest drivers of climate change. Transportation, electricity, industry, commercial, residential. These are oil, gas, coal, and then also agriculture. In the United States, it's 9%. Globally, it's 25% and even higher. So there's a lot of issues, and there's a lot of ways that we can address things and take action. But here are just two kind of the big ways, right? So the top things are, how can we reduce our energy use, our oil, gas, coal use, waste less, use renewable energy when possible, and we'll be talking about that again in a minute. And then when we're thinking about how we, through agriculture, are contributing to the greenhouse gases, we can have restorative nature, regenerative agriculture, and what we talked about today, mindful food practices. I shared this with Ray earlier, but in March, there's going to be a great interview and webcast that I'm involved with the minister from the environmental minister for the United Church of Christ, and I are going to be talking with the author of this book, and he just talks about how conservation and regenerative practices can happen in our own yards, our own parks, our own church lots, right? And that is one of the things that we can do as well. And so I will also forward that information on so that you all can attend that if you so desire. So there is great work already happening here at West Mesa. You all have done LED lighting, you're reducing, reusing, and recycling. You have a pollinator garden. I saw in the restroom a little sign reminding me to turn off the light. There's stuff all over, and everybody's even dressed in green today. So you all are rocking it here at West Mesa. And then there's always more that we can do. And it shouldn't be a stressful thing, but a joyous thing, because we know that when we are part of the solution and we are acting and we are living out our faith, that we then are able to balance that whole eco-grief, and we can feel good about living as Christ is calling us to live, and being, as the Apostle Paul says, having the same mind as Christ. So these are just some of the many, 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 many ways that we can live out our faith as West Mesa Christian Church and as individuals in our own homes and as a denomination on this list. And this is not an endless list for sure. But our goal Our goal is to be carbon neutral by 2030. And in order to do that, we eliminate as much CO2 as we can. That would be from transportation through electricity and energy use. And then we balance those emissions with offsets, which we will talk about again in just a little bit. An organization that Green Chalice has worked with since 2015 is Blessed Tomorrow, and they have a whole plan in Spanish and English that is a step-by-step, how do we do this going carbon neutral? And those guides are both on the Green Chalice website and also at blessedtomorrow.org. But the step one is just to commit to it. The Midway Christian Church that I was trying to show you the video of, but we couldn't get the sound, has committed to going carbon neutral. There are other congregations in California, disciples congregations, that are already carbon neutral. So our goal is just to move forward, to set goals and try to be carbon neutral by 2030. You all have already done a creation care team. You have already covenanted together. And the next step would be to do an energy audit, to make some goals, and to make a plan to do those by conserving energy. And then to earmark any green savings for more conservation. One of the things that you all have heard of, a debt snowball, like for those who are in debt and want to get out, you take your smallest debt and you pay on it as much as you are able, and when that's paid off, you take the amount that you were paying towards that and you transfer it to your next debt. They call it a snowball, so that over time you have the same amount of money that you are continuing to put towards debt so that you can get out of debt. So this is kind of on that model. I call it a green snowball. And so as you save money through LED lights that I know you all have already done, instead of that just going back into the general budget, that is earmarked as green. And you then take that money and you do the next thing. Programmable thermostats or lights that are motion detected or whatever it is that your need is. And then the savings from that next thing you continue to earmark, and you grow and grow and grow so that you can continue to put the green money, the green snowball money, towards more and more conservation and more creation care. So we're talking ultimately about our energy use, right? So we want to establish a baseline. One of the ways that we do that is through an energy audit. Some energy companies will do that for you. I don't know about here in Albuquerque how that works, but there are also other folks that you can get to come out and do an energy audit for you. The fabulous thing about a really good energy audit is that it shows you where you are losing the most money in energy and helps you start those places. But if that's just out of the realm of possibility right now, the other ways that you can do it is that Interfaith Power and Light has a Cool Congregations calculator where you can enter some information about your congregation, and it lets you know the carbon footprint of West Mesa Christian Church or whatever Christian church folks are at who are joining us. If that's even like, oh, we just don't have the time and energy for that, we also can just go back to 12 months of energy bills pre-pandemic, I suggest, because the pandemic has made everything so weird, and look at what are the kilowatt hours of energy that we used for 12 months, and you can find that on your electric bill, and what are the dollars that were spent in 1 year on electricity. And then as you set those goals, you're trying to lower the kilowatt hours and you're trying to save more and more money. So you develop an energy reduction and savings plan, money savings plan. And you can do that through lots of suggestions. You all have already done the LED light bulbs. But you can do automatic lights, programmable thermostats, insulation, window door replacement. You have the signage, and then just continuing to educate people and more. This, again, is not an exhaustive list, but some place to start getting us thinking about it. But then ultimately our goal is renewable energy. And I did a little research about how is renewable, because you all have a lot of great sunlight here. So I can just only imagine that solar is really, and I've seen a lot of solar, including the fire station as I drove to church today, has solar panels. But in 2016, the Albuquerque City Council unanimously adopted a resolution to have 25% energy from solar resources by 2025. And the city began aggressively adding solar energy. I couldn't find an update of what that means because all of the news now is, of course, pandemic, but hopefully those things are happening. In looking at just New Mexico, or not just looking at the state rather than just Albuquerque, there have been a commitment to add 29,000 acres to a solar farm in New Mexico. New Mexico was, I think in 2019, getting 6.3% of the energy from solar power, and that is expanding greatly. So that's really great news. That's really great news for all of you all who live here in New Mexico. But when we're looking at renewable energy, or you hear those words, we're talking about solar, wind, and or geothermal are the primary ones that we're talking about. And there are lots of ways that churches are getting solar panels, and that's going to depend on the area. And New Mexico is very different than Kentucky. If those aren't options, or until they are options, there is also something called Arcadia Power. Green Chalice has partnered with Arcadia Power as kind of, I think of it as an offset program. So I've used personally in my home Arcadia Power since 2018. And what happens is I pay just a little bit more, less than $10 more a month for my electricity than I would if I went just through Kentucky Utilities. And that enables my electric use to be 100% offset by wind energy. I'm participating in a wind energy program, but they also have solar programs. So it enables individuals and churches to use it. It's kind of an offset program, but to offset your electric use 100% or 50%. Through this program. And the more of us who support it, the more they're able to do, and it continues to fund and grow wind and solar energy in the United States. And if anybody wants to talk with me about that now or later, today or in the future, I'm happy to do that. So our goal as we're looking at carbon neutrality, of course, is conserve, right? Lower our energy use through LED light bulbs, through programmable thermostats, insulation, and all of those kinds of programs so that we're using less energy. So we get there. If we're able, we do a program like Arcadia, or we get solar. Some utility companies, electric companies even offer you to do a solar through them. I don't know how it is here in Albuquerque. But we get that down as much as we can, but we still have carbon because carbon is a part of life. And so then we zero out our emissions through offsets. One of the programs that there are many offset programs, and I'm happy to talk with folks about those. But one that has been thoroughly vetted and is a really great program is called Blessed Tomorrow Cool Effects. That particular program supports clean cook stoves in Uganda, so that as we support this program, it benefits the health of families, particularly women and children in Uganda. And also, by taking out the dirty cook stoves and getting them a clean one, it reduces their emissions. So it's a global program. But there are also wonderful programs that plant trees. I actually, in the Green Chalice News, either the last issue or the one before, I gave a link to the best tree planting programs that we can support. And so planting trees, but being aware that they're not all equal. It's important for us to vet those and do our work. But there are really many offset programs now. And then finally, one of the things that we have to participate in as individuals and as congregations is advocacy for climate at local, state, and national levels. So whether that be writing a letter, email, making a phone call to your legislators, going out for marches and rallies when it is safe for you to do so, and voting climate is really important. One of the things that's so important for us to understand, it doesn't matter if we're Democrat or Republican or independent or what we are, we rely 100% on this earth for life. And we have got to do all we can in order to protect the earth for life, for our children and youth, for those who are yet to be born, so that they might also have life and have it abundantly. And I really wanted to end with this video, but it's very important that we are able to hear it. So we're going to see if it works. And Ray has seen this video. It's a video of hope. It's a video that really helps us see that when humans get out of the way and when we allow God's beautiful world to do what it's supposed to do, that it does heal itself. So fingers crossed and little prayers that the video works. Oh, we can't hear it. Why? No, I don't know why. Don't know why.
Maybe you can just kind of explain what the video shows.
The youth can do sound effects.
The youth can do sound effects. They probably cannot tell the story, though. Oh.
Is it possible that, is it a YouTube video?
It is.
Is it possible that YouTube is muted? Yeah.
I don't know. You're speaking language I don't understand. Well, my computer's not, and I tried it out before worship, and it totally worked. So we tried each of the videos. All of them had sound. All of the knowledge that I have used.
Tell us about it.
I'm just hoping that maybe, can we just pull it up on the internet somewhere?
How about this?
Oh, okay, but it's not.
Let's start it over, right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
let's go back. Current slide. Yay. Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, but the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled In just 6 years, bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds and migratory birds started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion, the channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
I think it's really important that we remember that we are people of hope. Oh, thank you. And that we hope and that we stand on hope and we can hold all of the hard stuff, the science and the suffering and the climate disasters and the billion-dollar disasters and all of that stuff here, and we can still have hope. We can still have hope because we know that God can do amazing things. And that when we get out of the way, like that short video shows, when all of the wolves had been killed off in Yellowstone National Park, but when they were reintroduced after 70 years not being there in just such a short amount of time, amazing healing took place. We can be people who help be the instigators of that amazing healing with God's help, right? And so I wanted to pause now and just kind of allow us to talk as tables quietly and share just with each other of like what's on your heart. And it could be that there's something that you want to do, that you really want to do. It could be, I really need to work on the eco-grief stuff, and I need to get out more, or maybe join an eco-grief circle. It could be, I need to pray on this a little bit more. It could be, I'm going to commit to trying a new holy habit and work on that during Lent. It could be anything, honestly. So this isn't a like wanting you to feel more stressed. This is a way for us to share with each other just where we are right now after this presentation and after worship this morning. And is there anything that you're feeling that you would be willing to share? So we'll just pause for 5 or 10 minutes and share just as tables, and then we'll come back and if one person can kind of just give us a little summary of things at each table, and then we'll close. Okay? So let's share. We thank you for joining us today at West Mesa Christian Church, and we give you thanks that you have walked with us through this workshop and through maybe worship earlier today. And we're just going to stop now with our live stream and invite you to think about and share with anybody who's with you of what actions you might be called to do. And we invite you to check us out at greenchalice.org and also to check us out on Facebook. Thank you so much.